This past week, I went to Washington, D.C. to attend a congressional hearing on UAP, or Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, the new term for UFOs. I met my friend Tyler on Tuesday, November 12th, and we trekked around the Capitol in preparation for the hearing the following day at 11:30 a.m.
Today's hearing marks this committee's second meeting dedicated to UAP transparency. I was pleased, as I know all of us are, on the bipartisanship that existed in last year's hearing.
The hearing was the second congressional hearing on UAP in the last 2 years, the first coming in July of 2023.
Did the Tic Tac UAP move in such a way that defied the laws of physics?
The way we understand them, yes.
So what's going on here? Let's set the scene for those of you not living in the quickly growing UFO bubble.
The glowing ball of light dropping until it hangs just over the dome of the rock. These spectators a little more impressed.
The UAP topic is not new. It's safe to say that tales and illustrations go way, way back. But what is new is the way that people in positions of authority are beginning to talk about the subject. Once a topic of ridicule and left for those that wanted to believe, the conversation has taken a noticeably serious tone in the last decade. In its 2017 article titled Glowing Auras and Black Money, the New York Times described a shadowy organization within the Defense Department tasked with studying UAP and the phenomenon more broadly, something it had always denied. Along with the bombshell report were the now famous Go Fast and Gimbal videos, which showed vehicles performing maneuvers not currently accepted as possible. Without getting too much into the weeds, the revelations and images shocked those that were watching closely. The Pentagon had a secret UFO program that Congress apparently didn't know about. But even more shocking on a visceral level were the videos and later accounts of the FA-18 pilots.
The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had.
These videos that appeared a decade earlier on the conspiracy forum above Top Secret and were promptly debunked were now acknowledged by the Navy to be legitimate.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
They showed craft moving intelligently with advanced knowledge of control points, with no visible means of propulsion and exhibiting inertial forces that would tear any human-made materials to shreds, not to mention the pilots. Knuth has a great video going into the details of this from the first Seoul conference.
That gives you a lower bound for the acceleration, which comes out to be around 5,000 Gs, 5,000 times the acceleration of gravity. No, people aren't going to survive this. Most equipment won't survive this. An F-35's wings will rip off at about 13 Gs.
Whether this was craft of non-human intelligence or secret factions of the Defense Department fouling the range with advanced tech, this was highly problematic. Congress got involved in a serious way after the report. Closed-door hearings began in the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, where it appears Senators Rubio and Gillibrand were some of the first to take this seriously.
We still don't have all the answers.
And eventually, growing pressure from Congress saw the DoD establish the UAP Task Force as a public-facing body to investigate the subject. Congress continued to hold closed-door sessions. The Defense Department was required for the first time in 2018 to undergo a full audit for Congress, which it has failed every year since, most recently to the tune of $824 billion unaccounted for.
The reality is, despite their enormous taxpayer-funded budgets, the transparency of the Defense Department and the intelligence community have long been abysmal. The Pentagon has failed 6 consecutive audits. In fact, it's never actually passed one.
There were some events like the Alaska shootdown in 2022 that made mainstream news, but the public seemed mostly content to let those stories fall to the wayside unresolved. Then, in the late spring of 2023, the topic was thrust into focus when a whistleblower came forward with the claims of a government conspiracy to cover up the topic and much more. December of the previous year had seen the passage of UAP whistleblower protections in the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA. This paved the way for former intelligence officer David Grusch to come forward publicly to Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, and Ross Coulthart.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
He was already going through the whistleblower process with the government and was represented by the former Inspector General of the intelligence community, Charles McCullough. This wasn't a joke. To those following the topic, Grusch needs no introduction, but to those just tuning in, it's worth hearing for yourself.
I was my agency's co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. I became a whistleblower through a PPD-19 urgent concern filing in May 2022 with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country. Many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and my various colleagues.
First to Keene and Coulthart, and then to Congress in 2023, Grusch shared that he had found numerous and credible first-hand witnesses to a decades-old program of UFO crash retrievals, reverse engineering, and even alien body recoveries.
Do we have bodies? Do we have species of
Well,
non-human?
naturally, when you recover something that's either landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots.
He wasn't the first to come out with these kinds of stories, but he was certainly the first to do so publicly under oath to Congress. This was evidence.
Mr. Grusch, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Not the pictures of soldiers riding flying saucer type evidence that everyone wants to see, but court of law type evidence. The first hearing was 2 hours of exceptional testimony. He was joined by David Fravor and Ryan Graves, who shared their experiences with the previously mentioned Gimbal and Tic Tac events.
Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena. The stigma attached to UAP is real and powerful and challenges national security. It silences commercial pilots who fear professional repercussions, discourages witnesses, and is only compounded by recent government claims questioning the credibility of eyewitness testimony.
And you're not aware of any other objects that anybody in the world has, in this world, that has those capabilities?
No, I think it's far beyond actually our material science that we currently possess.
There's no doubt that Grusch's testimony moved the needle. Here was the former co-lead of the body established to investigate what was going on, coming back as a whistleblower to tell Congress he was denied access to the secret programs he sought to investigate, and instead faced retaliation when he attempted to interview first-hand witnesses to these programs.
Well, I hope you understand that there would be bipartisan rejection of any attempt to vilify, demonize, or engage in other reprisals against our witnesses and people who are telling the truth from their perspective.
Yeah, there were certain colleagues of mine that were brutally administratively attacked, and it actually makes me very upset as a leader to see that happen to other coworkers and actually superiors of mine over the last 3 years.
How do you account for that response? That seems like a bizarre response.
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their quiver, their tool in the toolbox to silence people, especially. The career government service cares about their career, cares about their clearance, their reputation to climb the ladder. And when you threaten that career path, a lot of people back off. But I'm here to represent those people.
And that's what's led us up to this past week's hearings. Obviously, a lot has happened in the year and change since the first hearing. A lot more eyes are on the topic. The UFO podcast world is abuzz. New York Times bestsellers are flying off the shelves, and Congress continues to meet with those that come forward. A UAP disclosure amendment in the 2024 NDAA passed with strong bipartisan support in the Senate, but was stripped down and left without teeth by House members of the Intel Committee. After Grusch came forward, members of the House seemed to take the reins.
I think it's time for this country to take back our country. We need to tell the folks at the Pentagon they work for us. Dadgummit, we don't work for them.
Members like Tim Burchett, Republican of Tennessee, and Jared Moskowitz, Democrat of Florida, were outspoken and seemingly motivated to keep the project on the hot burner, even more so than their counterparts in the Senate.
It's time for Congress to reinsert ourselves. I call on our military leaders and intelligence officials to release more information to the American people about UAPs. And to our military leaders, if there's nothing to conceal, let Congress go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the Dugway Proving Ground, or even Groom Lake in Nevada. We should have disclosure today. We should have disclosure tomorrow. The time has come.
In late September of 2024, Nancy Mace announced that she would be chairing a joint subcommittee meeting titled UAP Exposing the Truth. The hearing was scheduled for 11:30 a.m. in room 2154 of the Rayburn House building beside the Capitol.
Good morning. This joint hearing of the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation and the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs will come to order. Good morning and welcome, everyone.
The line to get in began around 9 p.m. the night before and grew to about 30 to match the temperature outside at 3 a.m.
And we're going to get a DC flyover because Chris Bledsoe has entered the House. He's in the line. So lots of people here, very excited, lots of experiencers, some new-timers.
By the time doors opened at 7:30 a.m., the front of the line had been waiting in near-freezing temperatures for over 10 hours, and the line for those hoping to get in snaked down the street. As the hearing drew near, witnesses, congresspeople, and celebrities of the UFO world began to show up. An overflow room was set up for hopefuls that wouldn't gain access to room 2154, and the hearing began at 11:30.
On that score, I want to thank our witnesses for being here. We have before us a panel of individuals accomplished in the military, in civilian government, in science, and in journalism.
This hearing had 4 witnesses.
Our first witness is retired Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, who retired from the U.S. Navy and is now the Chief Executive Officer at Ocean STL Consulting. Our second witness is Mr. Lou Elizondo, a former Department of Defense official and author of a recent bestseller book about UAPs. Our third witness is Mr. Michael Schellenberger, founder of the newsletter Public and author of a recent journalistic piece about special access programs, including one widely identified as Immaculate Constellation. I swear the staff wants me on a list. Okay. And our last witness today is Mr. Michael Gold, a former NASA official who is also a member of the NASA UAP Independent Study Team. Welcome, everyone. We are pleased to have you today.
Through 2 hours of testimony, the witnesses were asked remarkable questions and provided remarkable testimony.
Let me be clear. UAP are real. Advanced technologies not made by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe. Furthermore, the U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies, as are some of our adversaries. I believe we are in the midst of a multi-decade secretive arms race, one funded by misallocated taxpayer dollars and hidden from our elected representatives and oversight bodies.
To your knowledge, have any USOs ever outpaced our submarines?
Yes, ma'am.
At what magnitude?
I don't have the exact speed, but again, a witness came to me, a credible former submarine officer who observed it on sonar data. And this was in the 80s in the North Atlantic during a storm, and it outpaced his submarine by orders of magnitude.
To what extent do you think that some of the UAP out there comes from off the books or unauthorized experimental aircraft?
I mean, I think probably the vast majority of UAP are drones, experimental aircraft, weather conditions, which is again why I say if we review the data, I think we're going to discover a lot about things we weren't even thinking about. But there is a percentage that isn't. And looking into those anomalies is how discoveries will be made.
I'll show you this example here. This is a presentation from the UATP task force. This is completely absurd. It's nuts, this level of censorship, of redaction on a document. It shows the redaction of how many reports they've collected, for how many years. 2 of the 3 potential explanations are blacked out. The Pentagon, the intelligence community is treating us like children. It's time for us to know the truth about this. I think that we can handle it.
Earlier this year, I met with the DoD's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, and what I thought would be a 90-minute meeting just to meet with leadership turned out to be an hours-long influence operation on me, where they attempted to convince me of the validity of the very flawed and error-ridden historical records report. In addition, they tried to have me question very valid UAP reports like the Tic Tac incident, and even coming to stating possibly that the Tic Tac was American technology. And then, of course, if you ask David Fravor or Alex Dietrich, the 2 witnesses, they were convinced it was otherwise.
If it doesn't exist, why is it such a problem?
I think if you go through the history of science, Representative, it is always difficult for breakthroughs and new information, regardless of whether it's UAP or any other kind of discovery. And in science, we're supposed to be open, but when you break with the orthodoxy of what's believed, whether it's Galileo saying that the Earth doesn't rotate, or the Earth rotates around the sun, or the sun doesn't rotate around the Earth, it's always challenging for new beliefs. And the more extraordinary those discoveries, the more extraordinary those new beliefs, it's very difficult.
What's the key takeaway, just a few seconds, about the Immaculate Constellation document you provided us today?
I think that what the American people need to know is that the U.S. military and intelligence community are sitting on a huge amount of visual and other information, still photos, video photos, other sensor information, and they have for a very long time. And it's not those fuzzy photos and videos that we've been given. There's very clear
high
resolution.
And who would so if you were in our shoes, where would you go from here? How would you get that information? A lot of times we just don't know who to ask because we don't know where to go next. So if you were in our shoes, where would you go?
Well, I prefer to answer that question in a closed session. However, we established AARO for that very purpose, and unfortunately, under its previous leadership, it failed. So one would hope that they would have the authorities necessary to do that. Let's hope that this new iteration of leadership will be successful.
After 2 hours and a late entry, the hearing adjourned and the crowd trickled out. Rallies took place outside, and Congress people invited witnesses back to private meetings. So where does that leave us? There weren't any apparent bombshells in the hearing. Much of what was entered into the record was already talked about by witnesses beforehand. But what really does matter is that this all lends further credence to the story that Grusch and Fravor and Graves told in July 2023. And that story is worth keeping an eye on.